allegations. Let's go back to our top story, the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. We're joined from Washington, D.C. by Larry Luxner. He's the editor of the Washington Diplomat and is a contributor to Cuba News. Welcome to Al Jazeera. So the Cuban President Raul Castro hailing those warmer ties with the U.S., but saying that Cuba's not going to change its political system. What do you think of what he had to say?
You know, years ago, the dominant phrase and slogan in Cuba was socialismo o muerte, socialism or death. You don't hear much of that anymore, and in fact I believe that the Cuban leadership would like to slowly transition into some form of private sector economy while not opening completely to capitalism. I don't think there needs to be one extreme or the other. There could be a middle ground, and I do believe that the Cuban system can remain somewhat communist while opening up to private industry.
Yeah, because if it stayed completely communist, would that stand be practical with the U.S. planning to open its embassy again in Cuba and to commence banking in Cuba?
Well, I would like to point out that there are other communist countries in the world, not many, but we still have North Korea, China, Laos, and Vietnam. Those countries have remained communist, at least politically, and the United States has relations with them. South Korea has over 50,000, employs over 50,000 North Koreans in an industrial park right over the border, and they're as communist as can be. I do believe that there will be a softening of the rhetoric over time, and perhaps maybe not slogans planted in front of the U.S. intersection if it should become an embassy. I think we'll see a ratcheting down of the extremist rhetoric on both sides, yes.
Do you think this speech by Raul Castro was meant more for Cubans or for Americans?
Probably it was meant more for Cubans. I think their leadership in Cuba pretty much realizes that the government itself cannot provide, let's say, the social network and the health care, the education, the money, the quality of life that perhaps an opening to the United States would provide. We've already seen a dramatic increase in the amount of remittances that Cuban Americans can now send from South Florida, from the United States to their families in Cuba. So probably it's a way to keep Cubans patriotic, but to understand that to prepare for an opening, there's going to be a long road ahead. One of the first things they have to do is eliminate this dual currency system where you have regular pesos, which are virtually worthless, and you have convertible pesos, which is the currency tourists have to use. And as long as there's a dual currency system in place, I don't see how they can transition into any meaningful economic reform.
Is President Castro also trying to keep Cubans' feet very much on the ground? The key Cuban demand, the complete lifting of the U.S. economic embargo, is still to be met.
I agree that it's a long road away. You have very prominent Republicans in Congress, not just Republicans. Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey is a Democrat, and they're vowing to do whatever they can to block any kind of normalization, upgrading of our intersection in Havana to the status of a full-fledged embassy. Remember also that the Cuban government is projecting a 4% rise in GDP next year. I don't know how that would be possible without some kind of economic opening with the United States. Without that, it would probably be maybe 1%, maybe even less.
Larry, thank you very much for speaking to us. Larry Luxner, editor of the Washington Diplomat.
Thank you very much.
Now, the deal to better the U.S.-Cuba relationship could mean more options for people wanting to travel to the island.